So it's part 3 of lesson 12, COMP3025. So we've started to set up our Google Map. And if we look at this new resource file, it's telling us we need a Google Maps API key, and it gives us a link. So we're going to grab that link and follow it. So it'll take us to the Google API console, and it will ask us if we want to create a project or use an existing project. Now, we already have the Firebase project, so Google links them all together. So I'm just going to use, there's no need for an existing project. I'm going to tie my Google Maps API to my Fire Music project where Firebase is already configured. So I'll choose that project and click continue. And it wants us to create an API key. So we'll click on this. And here's the key. There's no secret. It's not like creating Google login where we have a client ID and client secret. It's just a public key. So I'm going to copy that. And it tells us in this resource file to paste we're going to put the value actually in 2 places. So we're going to put it in the Google Maps API XML file. So I'll paste it in here. Sorry, no, I'm not going to put it in there. The name is Google Maps key. The string goes here, where it says your key here. And put it in there. The other thing we're going to have to do is enable the Google Places API. So I'm going to go in the Google console. We've got these services set up for Firebase and now for Google Maps. I'll maybe rename this one. It just says API key 4. So maybe what I'll do is edit this. And I'll just give it a descriptive name rather than calling it API key 4. I'll call it API key. So at least it's descriptive in the console. I know what that key is. Ron, you okay? No, I'm not gonna. My class. It's too loud. There's more. That's fine. Okay? Well, no, like, are you ill? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to the API library, and I want to enable the Places API. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to enable this. So this API will be used for doing things like address autocomplete. If we give an edit text and we want to use it to start typing an address and have Google search for it, that's part of this API. We may not get to that today, but probably a good idea to enable it. Okay, so it's enabled now. So that should be everything we need to do in the Google console. Now we do need to add a dependency in build.gradle. So I'm going to open up my build file under the module.app. So we already have play services maps. Oh, okay, actually this is here already. That's good. I think we need one more. So first of all, I'm going to update this. So I'm going to update maps to the latest, which is 17.00. And the other thing is it's got our, okay, so it's reading our API key here from our Google Maps. So that actually gets added to the Android manifest as well. So now we can run the app. Hang on, I think there is one other, just want to double check. I think we are missing, we do need a reference. We need play services location, right? That's the one I was missing. So in here, now that we've added Google Play API, we want play services location, and the latest of this is also 17.00. So let's add that, and we'll do a sync. Maps got added automatically by Android Studio when we generated the map activity. But the location services, we need to add that dependency manually. So we'll run our app now. We should be able to log in, go to our profile activity, click on our location button, and we can see what the default map activity looks like. As we already saw before the break in our code, it should give us a marker in Sydney, Australia. So we'll try this out. I'll go to the profile. We now have our floating action location button at the bottom left. It loads our profile photo. So here's what we get. We get a full screen map with the marker. And if I click it, it shows me the text because we've set the title property as marker in Sydney. So it's using the Sydney, Australia longitude and latitude. So we can move our map around. We can't zoom. So by default, those zoom controls aren't enabled. So we'll want to do that. We'll want to enable zoom controls. We might also want to make our default marker somewhere else. Maybe we'll try it in, say, New York City first, then we can maybe go and look and see how do we make the default location in Barrie. There's also notice there's no ability to click and identify our current location yet, which typically, if we're going to give somebody a map, that's a common feature that we can just click the current location and it will zoom to where they are. We'll also need to ask for permission to use their GPS to turn their location services on. Many people, if you're like me, I find location services are too invasive and kills my battery, so I only turn on my GPS when I actually need it. Other than that, it's off. So this isn't going to be, that location is not going to be usable unless we ask for permission. So we'll just play around with this. I've thrown a link up here in lesson 12. I'll just show it to you. So largely what we're going to do, and there's more stuff in here than we're going to have time to do. But this is quite a good tutorial. So if you want to do more things, this is actually a great site for Android developers. It's free to sign up. You can use all the tutorials as an anonymous user, but if you want source code, you just have to sign up. It's free. So this is exactly what we're doing. Now this is about a year old, so we've had to update a couple of things. So we're basically going to do some of what's in here. We won't do all of it, but the rest of the resource is here. So if you want to do more, so it explains doing things like generating a map with a series of markers on it. So we could provide an array of locations and it would plot them all, for example. We're not going to have time to do that. So the top part is just the setup we've already done. Right? This is what it gives us, the default code. So now we're going to do a bit more with this. We'll do some of the other things in the tutorial. So we already have a reference mmap to our map. I don't really like that name. I'm just going to rename it to map. Because we're going to make many references to this object. You can leave it if you like. I think in his tutorial, he also renames it. We're also going to need if we want to use the location services, uses this class, fused location provider client. It takes a minute and then we'll import the class. So that's part of that, excuse me. Part of that dependency we added to build.Cradle. That's part of the Google location services. Without that dependency, it's not going to know what this location provider client class is. So then in our on create, we'll instantiate our location client. So we'll use our location services. So what this should do is this should allow us, this should give us a little click here like to set my location. I think that will appear at the top right. Let's try that. Okay, so we don't get it yet. We still got a little bit more to do. You know, the other thing I'm going to do, maybe just to save us a bit of time, is temporarily, there's no authentication check in this activity. I'm going to switch Android manifest so the map activity is the first activity. So I don't have to log in and go through the profile activity each time. I'll just temporarily make this our launcher activity. So every time we make a change, it'll just automatically load. So this is temporary. So in my maps activity, I'm just going to move this intent filter inside the map activity instead. So now rather than loading our sign-in activity, it'll load the map activity. So I'll just restart and we should get the map right away. Okay, so our map just loads. We're not worried about the rest of the app for now. We want to add the zoom controls as well. There's no way to zoom in or zoom out. So in my on map ready, we want to enable the zoom controls. We'll come back and finish the location. So we have a get UI settings. And we can set these zoom controls to true. Whoops, sorry. This shouldn't say is, this should be set. So we should get plus and minus zoom in, zoom out buttons here. So this line of code adds our zoom in and zoom out. Now, I think the reason our location isn't working is a permission. So we should see an icon here to click that would set to our current location. But we need to ask for permission to do this. Okay. Let's see. Actually, we'll just make it available. So we want to check the permissions. Check permissions. So we're going to check our self permissions on this. So if this permission So if our location permission is not granted, we want to request permissions. So on this, we're going to have an array of one permission. So if we don't have location permission already granted, ask for location permission. And we'll call this at the end of our onReady. It's going to start to initialize the map. We want to check if the app can use location services. We may have to modify this a little bit. So right away, it says, can we use the location? So this is running as soon as I restart. Now we can also change the location. So they default this to Sydney. If we want to change this, we can change this to, let's say, New York. I think this is straight from the tutorial. Take out the minus here because we're in the northern hemisphere. So if we run it with different coordinates and set the title, this should actually default our map to New York instead of Sydney, Australia. Right, so now it reloads here. Okay. Now, what if we don't want to hard code it to New York? That was just some default code. Okay. We're going to actually add something to our activity definition up at the top. So we're going to add a click listener to the map. We want to add an on marker click listener into the definition. When we do this, it says, well, let's see, we're missing an override now. If it's going to implement this event, we need a click listener. So we're going to add override or map click listener. So it now will build. So our class also implements the on-click marker. It gives us a not implemented, which we'll replace. And also in our map on ready, implement map click listener. So what is we'll call set on click. Oops, sorry, this is on marker. So we're implementing the on marker click listener. We're overriding the method. I'm missing one thing here. We have no method body.
What am I missing here?
I think we can just, this returns a Boolean, so we'll just return false. There. So we'll run this again. And then we're going to add some code to our map ready that's going to, instead of defaulting to New York, we're going to get the current location and go to the current location. So right now we just get this map. It's not defaulted anywhere. So after we check permissions, we're going to zoom map for find current location on map. So we're going to set is my location and will equal to true. Then we'll use our location client it has a last location. So the last location that we found, and it has an add on success listener we're going to use. So if our last location isn't null, I think we'll need a variable for this. So we're going to use the location services to give us our current latitude and longitude. And it's kind of a weird method, but we call Animate Camera. That basically, we're not actually using the camera to take a photo. It's creating the window in the map. We call Animate Camera using this camera update factory class. We set a new latitude and longitude zoom. And we can set the zoom factor. We'll try it with 12F. Whoops, sorry, that's a parameter for the zoom. So if we find it zoomed in too much or too little, we can change that factor. I think I need our we've got a variable I haven't declared. Yes, I want to declare it globally. So it will store the last location. So our last location variable will be location. I think I need late in it. Now it can't make the reference here. So all of our references have automatically been resolved. The reason is this is not an ambiguous, this is not an unambiguous. There are multiple location classes. It wants to know, is this from Firebase location or is it from Android location? So this is not a Firebase class. So I want the first one, the Android location class. So if we run this now, this is going to check if we had a last location, which we don't. And it's going to check for our current location using the emulator's latitude and longitude. And the map is going to zoom in by a factor of 12 to that location. So let's see how this runs. So now when I start it, you notice it zooms me in here to Barrie, and I also have the ability to set my location. So I already have a last location in my emulator, and if I click my current location, Doesn't take us, actually, doesn't take us. That's interesting. Notice where it is. If I zoom in, it takes me into Barrie, but somewhere over here in the southwest end of town, it doesn't actually take me to Georgian. If you run yours, it probably loads a different place. Where does it take you? Where does your map show? Probably doesn't show Barrie, and there's a reason. Yep, what location does it show? Does anybody's map actually load? What should happen, the default with the emulator when you get it to run, is it actually should take you, if you click on your location, it's going to take you to the Google office in Mountain View, California. If you go to your emulator and you click this little ... down at the bottom, the more, and you go to location, the default latitude and longitude will be for Mountain View, California. So if you run this on your device, on your actual phone or tablet, it'll give you the proper location. But the emulator defaults to Google's offices. So I've changed my emulator. Here's Barrie's, kind of the center, geographic center of Barrie. Here's the latitude and longitude. So I've updated the latitude and longitude on my emulator. That's why it's finding me directly in Barrie. So if I want to click, see if we find the college. So if I click something at the college, okay, so it's using, it's using this latitude and longitude. So when I say find my location, that's where it finds me based on the emulator. If we run this on our phone, it's going to find our proper location. So we went through, I adapted a little bit of this. Have gone through the first part of this. To get our current location. And it also explains about updating the latitude and longitude. Actually, if I go, I can probably update that again. So if I go to Google Maps, I'll update it to the exact latitude and longitude of Georgian in my emulator settings. So there's the latitude. I can get this from the URL on Google Maps. There's the longitude. So I'll click send, and now if I go back to my app and click my location button, now it takes me to Georgian because it's using that hard-coded set of coordinates. So this is a bit of a warning or gotcha. If we're going to use the location services, we really need to test with the real device. Because the location service is on the emulator, you basically have to supply a location and you can't move it. That's where it is. So we're better to have a real device where it will identify where we are. The emulator simply looks at the coordinates that we've hard-coded into the settings, and those don't change. So if I go and take my laptop home today and run this again, and click the location, it's still going to use those coordinates and think I'm a Georgian. It doesn't update automatically. I'm just going to put my startup activity back as my sign-in activity, because I want my map to be inside it. So if I just stop the app, I'll just run it one more time. And I'll sign back in and go to the profile. It should remember my last location and it should pin me at Georgian. Actually, sorry, it won't remember the last location if I restart the app. But it's just going to read it from the Georgian coordinates on my location services. So I'll go back to my profile, open the map, and it's going to pin me here at Georgian based on the latitude and longitude that I've hard-coded into the emulator's GPS. So there's that's all I'm going to do with this. So we've basically gotten to about here, about 2/3 of the way. It also describes how you can change the map type. So for example, if you want a satellite map, we can change from map type normal to map type satellite. There's a hybrid that's kind of both. We can implement geocoding and set up. We can get updates and also place markers and do a place-based search using the Google Places API. So if you have a chance, there's some other useful things in this tutorial, and it is in Kotlin, unlike a lot of the Android tutorials we'll find online. This is actually current, it's in Kotlin. So the link is here in lesson 12, if there's additional things that you want to do with the map API. I'm going to push everything up to Git. Does anybody have questions before we go for today? I'll maybe update the README file for this and make a note about setting the latitude and longitude in your emulator coordinates with the map, because it's a bit confusing otherwise. You may wonder why when you load your map, you get Google. Okay, well, that's all for today. Really looking forward to seeing the final apps. Make sure those are published to the store and that you've submitted both your individual as well as your group grades, please, before class next week, and please be on time. We'll start right at 8.